Next topic, students, that we are going to study is women and revolution. If you remember last class, we have seen how French Revolution and the consequences that arises after the revolution, such as rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. We have seen how Napoleon came in power, how convention work. So at the same time now we are going to examine the impact of French Revolution on the society, and women were the part of the, what kind of citizen? Passive citizens. So whether a revolution gives any benefit to them or not, or whether a woman satisfied with the outcomes of revolution, what were their aspirations from the revolution, that we are going to discuss. We are going to see the condition of women in the French society before and after the revolution. Such kind of questions can be asked in the examination, examining the condition of women in France before and after the revolution. So for that particular point of view, this particular topic is very, very important. We are going to investigate whether the French Revolution really revolutionized the life of women or not. So first of all, just remember, women of the third estate had grievances against the old regime. If you remember old regime? Old regime means the institutions, the political system that was prevailing in France during the 18th century. And in a simple word, the institutions, the political system that was prevailing in France before the French Revolution was called the old regime. So people, women of third estate, actually all the members of third estate were having their grievances to the old regime, especially women. Why? We have to see. Women, when women was started, this revolution was started, they had participated in great numbers, hoping that after revolution, they could be given right to equality, right to vote. They should be given a space in the councils, in the assemblies, which they were asking for equal political rights. If you see the background of the women, they were paid less, even they were performing the same work that a man is performing. They were indulged in household work. They were also selling vegetables, flowers, and doing a number of works also. So in French society, women, especially the third estate women, they were just working. They were just earning their own means of livelihood. Somehow, they all were engaged. But one more contradiction was there. They were deprived to get education. I have written. Could not receive education or job training and perform household work. Received less wages than the men. So this was the condition. But what had happened? When the revolution was started and after the 1791 constitution, what had happened? They had not been given political equality. They have been reduced to the status of passivity. They don't have the right to vote. They don't have equal rights. And they were not given any kind of equality in their day-to-day life. This was the condition. In that particular background, what had happened? A number of women clubs were organized to raise their voice, raising the voice for equal rights. So there were more than or nearly 60 women clubs operating in different cities of France, and out of those 16, one of the most important famous club was the Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women. This particular society, a women club, was headed by Olympe de Gouges. She was a very brave lady. She was having the courage to raise the voice and criticize the government's act. She had played an important role in bringing change to the lives of women. What were the demands of these women clubs? Demanding political rights, means right to vote or to be a part of the assemblies. These women were played a very important role during the French Revolution. They were the major part of the mob that was marched towards the Winter Palace of King, due to which the Bastille, fall of Bastille had happened. So women were keeping the placards over there in that particular march, demanding rights, food. But what they got? They got punishment, the bullets. And due to what? Due to that, fall of Bastille was there and revolution was started. So they were hoping in revolutionary government, the government may take a number of the steps to improve their lives. Few things have changed, but in a large scale, nothing has been changed significantly. So now, next what we will discuss how some changes had been made to improve their lives, but really those changes change the life of women or not. So next topic we will going to see how revolutionary government act toward the demand of the women clubs, and also we will see what Robespierre government done with the women and what Napoleon had done with the women demand. So we were discussing about the condition of women during the revolution, before the revolution and after the revolution. So just go through the facts. Just now we have discussed what were the condition of women before the revolution and what were the demands. Now we are going to discuss what had happened after the revolution. Whether the changes that had been brought by the new government, whether really improved the lives of women, whether the women were satisfied. So see, now just find the facts and truth. So the next thing that we have to learn, the women during the revolutionary government means the government that came in power just after the French Revolution. So what had happened? In its early years, the revolutionary government indeed started a number of work for the improvement of women's life. No doubt. See, what had they had done? So a number of the schools were opened for women, and remarkable thing, education made compulsory for all girls. लड़कियों के लिए शिक्षा व्यवस्था अनिवार्य की गई. Remarkable. Next one. Marriage was made into a contract, entered into freely, and it should be duly registered. Means marriage must be registered and it had been made a contract. Actually, why such kind of provisions were made? Till this particular time, in French society, women were treated as a second-class citizen. They were under the control of men. Means men were dominating in society. Men can enter into a number of, you can say, affairs and all. They may hire more women, and women do not have their wish. They could not express the wish whether she liked to marry with the person, that person or the other person. On that time, they were not having such kind of freedom. But men were having the freedom. Men can just leave that woman, but women can't. So, to give equal rights to women also, two things it has been done. Number one, marriages were made just like a contract and should be registered. And if there is a contract, so both the parties can just move out from the contract. Means they can withdraw their contract. Means divorce can be taken by both the parties. Means male or woman. They could take divorce and they could free from that particular contract. Earlier, it was not possible. Women could not just come out from the marriage by their own. But now, this particular law had empowered women to decide about their future. So it is a remarkable change. Next chapter. Divorce was made legal both for men and women. Now, women could receive training for jobs, could become artists or run a small businesses. These all are seems to be that it has revolutionized the lives of the women. But even though these were the provisions, changes, reforms introduced by the revolutionary government, but whether the status of women had changed? No. Why? Even though they got such kind of revolutionary changes, but it could not change their actual status. Still, they were deprived from political rights. Still, they were regarded as a passive citizens. No political rights. In absence of political rights, there is no meaning of such kind of reforms. So still they were deprived. They were treated as second-class citizens. And if you remember, what were their major demands of the women clubs? The major demand of the women of France during the revolution to have equal political rights. So still they were deprived. And during the Robespierre government, reign of terror, Robespierre clamped down all the women clubs. He reacted very aggressively and strictly. Robespierre believed that women should remain inside the house and perform the household work. Robespierre believed that women should not enter into political arena. They should be ruled by men. This was their thought. So he was very strict towards the women clubs. So women clubs were clamped down during the reign of terror, and women organizations, those who were criticizing the government's act, they all were closed. Their leaders were arrested, punished, and if you remember, Olympus de Gauche, she was also arrested and punished. She was killed during this period of time. So we will discuss about that Olympus de Gauche separately. So this was the condition till the reign of terror. And what had happened afterward? Whether women got the rights? No idea. They had to fight more years, nearly 400 years. They had to fight to get equal political rights. So next few things are yet. So we will see how women continued their struggle after the reign of terror also. Reign of terror के बाद, reign of terror के बाद क्या उन्हें अधिकार मिले? No. Women continued their struggle for voting rights. Not in France, in rest of the Europe also, rest of the world also, for next more than 200 years. The women's struggle for political right become an example for rest of the world. Women organizations functioning in different parts of Europe, they raised the voice for equal political rights, inspired by the French women. And do you know, when French women got the equal political rights, it was 1946. French Revolution that had started in 1789 with the demand of women to have equal political rights. That demand was addressed in 1946. Just imagine. Such a long journey had to be covered only for the sake of equal political rights. You can imagine what kind of society was existing during that period in Europe, in France. In 1946, they got the right. Means you can understand the condition of women. They were seen as a second class. They were seen as a subordinate to men. They were used to put in household works and they were not allowed to raise their demands. A revolutionary government started a number of work that changed their lives, but that change has not put them at equal political arena. They still acted as a subordinate to the men. So global changes were not very much important. It was still incomplete. Until unless people do not have equal political rights, there was no meaning of having any other kind of changes. Women were not allowed to raise their voice. So this was the scenario. So in that particular context, I would like to just give you the functioning and working of the most famous women club led by Olympus D. Gauses. So we will discuss about her also in a very, you can say, in a short way. In a short summary, we will discuss about her deeds. Let's see. One of the important figures in that particular feminist movement, which is the movement for the women's right, is just the life of the revolutionary woman Olympus D. Gauses. She just worked in France during the revolutionary period. This was her life from 1748 to 1798. Olympus D. Gauses, she was one of the leading figures in the French society who was raising the voice of the women organizations and right for the women. What kind of rights? Equal political rights. So see, she protested against the Constitution of 1791 and the Declaration of Rights of Men and Citizens. Men and citizens. And you know that citizens were divided into two categories, active and passive. So she was just criticizing why women have been kept in passive citizenship and why the rights of men was there. Why not women rights were also included. So she criticized the Constitution of 1791 and the Declaration of Rights of Men and Citizens. Next, she wrote against this particular document, Rights of Men and Citizens. She herself wrote a declaration of the rights of women and citizens, where she demanded equal rights for women. She raised her voice that women should not be treated as a subordinate, and she just addressed to Queen and to the members of the National Assembly, demanding that they act upon it. उनसे उम्मीद करती थी कि इस बात को माना जाए कि महिलाओं को भी बराबरी के हक दिए जाए. Now, see, in 1793, it was the period of Reign of Terror. Robespierre was there, Caesar control. Robespierre was not entertaining any kind of criticism. When Olympus D. Gauses, she just criticized by the act of the government to clamp down the women clubs. She criticized, and due to that, she was just arrested, charged under the charges of treason, and ultimately she was executed. She was killed. And do you know which organization did it? It was the National Convention. So you can see a number of contradictory was going on. At one side, you may notice that National Convention was busy to provide some changes. At the same time, you can see the Skin Convention was not allowing such kind of women voice. So, still, towards the women, the eyes of the government was still closed. And even though after the revolution, women got a number of social changes in their benefit. You have seen what had happened. New laws were made, schools were opened, education was made compulsory for girls, marriage became legal, divorce was also made legal, it became a contract. So a number of things were there. But reality was different. In political arena, they don't have equal rights, still they were lag behind. So this was the condition of women. So now you are able to write about the condition of women before and after the revolution. Next topic that we have to learn, it was the slavery, means revolution and slaves. Because slaves were the reality in the French society, not only in the French society, in the European society. So next we will discuss about the slave and the revolution. Next topic that we have to learn in the chapter French Revolution, that is the abolition of slavery. Abolition of slavery means Das Pratha ka ant. Slavery means Das. The major question is, what do you mean by slave? ये slave बोलते क्या है? किसे हम slave कहेंगे? या दास प्रथा ठीक है? Actually, slavery refers to a kind of social economic system in which some people were just and put under this control of others. This was the situation when these kind of people do not have their own right on their body and their minds also. It all were controlled by others. Their masters will decide about them. They were just treated as a commodity rather than a human being. That is the meaning of slave. So in medieval period, slavery was the reality. So as in France also, it was not only in France, it was practiced in whole world. Since we are discussing about the French Revolution, so I am just taking the case study related to slavery in France. What had happened with France? Because slavery is just against the democratic principles. So, in that point of view, it should be known to us whether after the revolution, lives of slaves were changed or not, whether slavery continued or not. Because if you remember, we have just used one particular word, means the outcome of French Revolution was also full of contradiction. 1791 Constitution that was guaranteed about the social and economic rights, equality before law, but there was no as such equality. So it was full of contradiction. So as over here. So actually there was a very rich slave trade, rich, because people were making money through this particular trade, slave trade. You can say मानव व्यापार, इंसान की खरीद बिक्री होती थी। ये इंसान कौन थे और किन परिस्थितियों में होती थी, आप समझते हैं। तो उसके लिए एक टर्म है हम यूज करेंगे, that is called triangular slave trade. Triangular, आप triangle समझते हैं? निश्चित रूप से समझते हैं। तो triangular slave trade, इसमें तीन बेसिक्स हैं। एक, ये मैंने एक फिगर बनाने की कोशिश की है। ये स्लेव ट्रेड का कॉन्सेप्ट आपको समझने में सहायता करेगी। At one particular vertex of this particular triangle, there is Europe, and then after America, and then after Africa. Now see, what is the relationship? Why I have made it? Actually, after the discovery of America, it was discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1492. America was discovered by Columbus in 1492. Then the Europeans come to know about the America. Now, what had happened? America emerged as a land of opportunities because America is full of resources. But the population of America was very much tribal and they were not equipped how to exploit the resources. But Europeans were more developed than the Americans, original inhabitants. So Europeans rushed towards America and they established their plantation farms. And now they require men, those who could work in the plantation. they were searching about the labor force at minimum cost. In that situation, these Europeans, means over here we can say French, were sailing towards the Africa, and from Africa there were two ports, Bordeaux and Nice, and from there they get slaves from Africa. Who were slaves in Africa? Actually, Africa on that time was a tribal society, and there were tribal clashes. When a group of tribals won another group of tribals, they just imprisoned the defeated population. Men, women, all were shackled and sold into the slave market. So, European traders, they got an opportunity on seeing that there was a great demand of these kind of labor, these kind of slaves in America. They took those slaves from Africa. They were coming over here and they were just taking the slaves from Africa, sailing down to America and selling those slaves to the plantation owners in America. They required those manpower. And then after, Europeans collecting money after selling those slaves and going back to Europe. This is called triangular slave trade. And Europeans made huge money from this slave trade. So questions are on and often asked from this particular topic about the slave trade. What do you mean by slave trade? And then after, you might be asked about these ports, from which area, which port slave trade was very much flourished, and math questions also asked from this particular point of view. One more thing. So this was the slave trade. But what had happened after the revolution? Whether the slave trade was abolished? Now, see. Actually, when the National Assembly came in power, National Assembly. Remember National Assembly? That framed the Constitution for France, 1791 Constitution was there. National Assembly started discussing to abolish slave trade, but having the fear of these plantation owners, businessmen, those who were earning huge money from this particular slave trade, they just kept their notion with them, means they had not implemented their proposal to abolish slave trade. Means National Assembly had failed to abolish slave trade. So slave trade was continued. National Assembly failed. Now, what about the another aspect? In 1794, the convention, the newly elected assembly, it took initiative and abolished slave trade in colonies. Which colonies? French colonies. Means कि 1794 में कन्वेंशन ने स्लेवरी सिस्टम को फ्रेंच कॉलोनीज में समाप्त कर दिया. Great work, but reality, the system continued or not? See, after this point of time, the another person come in power that changed the whole history of France, Europe, and it was Napoleon. So Napoleon, when rose to power, Napoleon came to power in 1804. Napoleon restored slavery. यानी नेपोलियन ने क्या किया? स्लेवरी को रीइंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया. रीइंट्रोड्यूस. आपसे सवाल पूछा जाए, who reintroduced slavery in France? Napoleon. Means the same. French Revolution was full of contradiction. इक्वालिटी की बात हो रही है, लेकिन यहाँ पे स्लेवरी कंटिन्यू करेगी. स्लेवरी is an inhuman practice that goes against the principle of humanity, equality. There was no right to them. They were treated just like a commodity, just like an animal. So next one. तो क्या हुआ? फाइनली स्लेवरी का क्या हुआ? आप पूछ सकते हैं सर स्लेवरी कहाँ गई? अंत में क्या हुआ? आपने क्या देखा? महिलाओं को वोटिंग राइट कब मिला? 1946 में. The struggle for abolishing slavery continued, or it was ended finally. Do you know in which year? It was finally ended in 1848. Slavery abolished from the French colonies. 1848 में जानते हैं फ्रांस का रूलर कौन था? नेपोलियन द थर्ड, नेपोलियन बोनापार्ट का भतीजा. एंड उसके इस एक्ट के कारण नेपोलियन बोनापार्ट के भतीजे यानी नेपोलियन थर्ड ने 1848 में जब वो फ्रांस का राजा बना तो उसने स्लेवरी को एबॉलिश किया. इसके कारण नेपोलियन थर्ड को लिबरेटर कहा जाता है, मुक्तिदाता, क्योंकि उसने एक बहुत बड़ा कार्य किया कि फ्रांस के अंदर स्लेवरी को, फ्रांस के अंदर ही नहीं, जहां भी फ्रेंच कॉलोनीज थी, जहां जहां फ्रांस ने एक अधिकार कर रखा था, उन सभी जगहों से स्लेवरी को एबॉलिश कर दिया. इसीलिए उसे मुक्तिदाता भी कहते हैं या लिबरेटर भी. सो दैट इज वेरी मच इंपॉर्टेंट. सो दिस इज अबाउट द स्लेवरी and how slavery was come to be ended. So you just try to examine the outcomes of French Revolution in the connection of slavery too, because they were also a part of the society and was an important part, because France was an agricultural economy. So in that kind of economy, plantation farming required huge number of laborers, and they were fulfilling the demand, these slaves. So end of slavery took France into the new era. It improved the lives of the people, and the standard of life of slaves were also improved. So ending, abolishing slavery means giving the rights to them, treating them as a human being. So अब हम क्या पढ़ेंगे? अब हम पढ़ने वाले हैं जो लास्ट टॉपिक है वो पढ़ेंगे हम लोग द रेवोल्यूशन इन एवरीडे लाइफ, यानी फ्रांस की क्रांति ने लोगों के दैनिक जीवन को, डे टू डे लाइफ को कैसे प्रभावित किया. हाउ. तो अगला टॉपिक हमारा होगा हाउ रेवोल्यूशन अफेक्ट द एवरीडे लाइफ. स्टूडेंट्स, नेक्स्ट टॉपिक द रेवोल्यूशन एंड एवरीडे लाइफ. In this topic, what we are going to discuss? We are going to see how revolution changed the everyday life of French people. That is the important thing. A revolution had happened, but whether it brought changes in the life of the people or not. So we have seen 1791 Constitution was full of contradiction, but still it was a milestone. It took the changes. So how things were changed? You have seen during the convention, even National Assembly had introduced a number of reforms that improved the life of common people. We have just seen abolition of slavery was also there. We have seen schools were open for the girls also, compulsory education was there, right to property was given, divorce, marriage, they all were regulated by laws. So a number of ways things was going to be improved. Now people were realizing more and more liberty, more and more freedom, even though there was a check, there was a contradiction. As we have seen, equal political right was completely absent. We have also seen the attitude of Maximilian Robespierre, those who was very much autocratic and just taking any opposition as a treason, as a kind of destroy. So they were punished. So contradiction was there. But still, the French Revolution paved the path for the modern democracies. That is important. And how? See, what were the changes that affect the everyday life? Very important. Apart from those reforms, in 1789, abolition of censorship. Do you know the meaning of censorship? Censorship is a way through which governments check any critical ideas or opposing ideas that goes against the interest of the government. Means you are not allowed to publish anything that goes against the government. Before publishing anything, before performing even through a play, even a song, even a book, even a newspaper, even in open stage, you cannot speak anything that goes against the government. And before doing this, your writings must be checked by the government officials. With the approval of those officials, you can publish anything, you can perform. Otherwise, that will be taken as a treason, देशद्रोह के रूप में माना जाएगा. तो 1789 के रेवोल्यूशन के साथ ही स्लेवरी को सेंसरशिप को समाप्त किया गया. बहुत बड़ी माइलस्टोन, क्योंकि इसने क्या इंश्योर किया? इसने इंश्योर कर दिया आपको राइट टू फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच. आप अपनी बात रख सकते हैं, आप अपनी बातें कह सकते हैं. और ये वो चीजें हैं जो अलाउ करती है अपोजिंग आइडियाज को सत्ता पे आने के लिए. इससे कमी, सरकार की कमियां मालूम चलती है, लोगों की सोच का ज्ञान होता है. ये एक हेल्दी साइन होती है किसी भी स्वस्थ समाज के लिए. अगर समाज की तरक्की चाहिए, मानव समाज की तरक्की चाहिए, हमारी संस्थाओं की मजबूती चाहिए, पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम को मजबूत करना है, उसकी कमियों को दूर करना है, तो हमें अपोजिंग व्यूज को आने देना, रोक लगाना, सेंसरशिप लगाना, ये प्रजातंत्र की भावनाओं के खिलाफ है. तो यहां भी वही चीज किया है. सेंसरशिप को एबॉलिश करके इस अपोजिंग व्यूज को पब्लिकली आ सकते हैं. लोग अब बैठ करके इसमें बहस कर सकते हैं, अपनी बातों को लिख सकते हैं, न्यूज़पेपर में पब्लिश कर सकते हैं, पैम्फलेट पढ़ सकते हैं, किताबें पढ़ सकते हैं, नाटक के द्वारा, सॉन्ग के द्वारा वो अपनी बातों को रख सकते हैं. सो इससे क्या फायदा? इसने एक अपोजिंग व्यू को सत्ता पे आने दिया, एक समाज के अंदर संवाद पैदा हुआ. मीन्स डिबेट, डायलॉग विद इन द सोसाइटी with opposing views and society with the government. ये एक बेहतरीन तरीका है समाज को समझने का और पॉलिटिकल इंस्टीट्यूशंस को मजबूत करने का, अंडरस्टैंडिंग करनी है. किसी की बातों को दबा देना, उसको बोलने की आदत नहीं देना बहुत बहुत बुरा होता है. यहां पे इस चीज को समाप्त किया, ये बहुत बड़ी माइलस्टोन है. और ये मॉडर्न डेमोक्रेसी की बीज है, ये रूट है, यहीं पर से निकलती है. तो ये महत्वपूर्ण सिद्धांत है जो आज भी हमारे जीवन का महत्वपूर्ण अंग है. फिर देखिए, अब इससे क्या फायदा होगा? जब अपोजिंग व्यू आ जाएंगे तो वो लोग जो सुन नहीं, जो पढ़ नहीं सकते, जो पढ़े लिखे नहीं हैं, वो भी क्या करेंगे? वो प्ले देख करके, नाटक देख करके, सॉन्ग सुन करके, फेस्टिव प्रोसेसेस में भाग ले करके उन्हें भी ज्ञान होगा कि उनके अधिकार क्या है. उन्हें भी समझ आएगी कि सरकार, सत्ता और जनता के बीच क्या रिश्ते हैं. ये एक बेहतरीन तरीका है जनता और सरकार के बीच रास्ता आने के. रास्ता का मतलब यहाँ पे एक उर्दू वर्ड है, इसका मतलब होता है संवाद स्थापित करना. जनता क्या चाहती है, सरकार को पता चले, और सरकार क्या कर रही है, क्यों कर रही है, ये जनता को पता चले. ये बहुत बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है. जैसे मैं आपको पढ़ाऊं और मैं आपको क्वेश्चन पूछने की अनुमति नहीं दूं तो क्या होगा? It will be monotonous. You don't have the faith in me, and I also do not come to know what percentage learning was going on. Means आप कितना सीख पा रहे हो, मैं नहीं चेक करता. तो ये जो बेहतरीन चीज है संवाद, ये हमारे जीवन के प्रत्येक पहलू को प्रभावित करती है और डे टू डे लाइफ का ये अभिन्न अंग है. तो फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन ने इस चीज को बदला. इसके अलावा जो रिफॉर्म्स हमने पढ़े हैं वो भी है एक बात. प्रिविलेज को खत्म करना, अब मेरिट के आधार पर चीजों को इंट्रोड्यूस करना, बेस्ड ऑन बर्थ को खत्म करना, दीज ऑल आर देयर. नेपोलियन कोड was there. उसने यूनिफॉर्म कोड दिया, यूनिफॉर्म सिस्टम ऑफ वेट एंड मेजरमेंट दिया. दीज ऑल आर देयर. बट इसके साथ आप इसकी भी चर्चा करेंगे, एवोल्यूशन ऑफ सेंसरशिप. तो एक बहुत बड़ी चीज आ गई कि अब पीपल रीड कीनली अबाउट द इवेंट्स एंड चेंजेस व्हिच वर टेकिंग प्लेस इन फ्रांस. अब फ्रांस में जो परिवर्तन हो रही है, लोग उस पर विचार कर रहे हैं, अपनी बातों को रख रहे हैं, अपने आइडियाज को स्प्रेड कर रहे हैं. तो कॉन्फ्लिक्टिंग आइडियाज आएंगे. इन्हीं कॉन्फ्लिक्टिंग आइडियाज के बीच से एक नई विचारधारा पैदा होगी जो सिस्टम को इंप्रूव करेगी. क्योंकि परिवर्तन एक निरंतर चलने वाली प्रक्रिया है और यही इतिहास की धारा है, यही इतिहास है. और जिसने इस धारा को समझा वही इतिहास को समझ सकता है. इसमें कुछ भी अलग नहीं है. हमें परिवर्तन को देखना है कि किन किन रास्तों से परिवर्तन होती है और उसके तथ्य क्या क्या है. दिस इज ऑल अबाउट द हिस्ट्री. तो यहाँ पे एक इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक हम लोगों ने पढ़ा, द रेवोल्यूशन एंड एवरीडे लाइफ. अब जो टॉपिक हम पढ़ने वाले हैं वो है हमारा कि रेवोल्यूशन की लेगेसी, द फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन की लेगेसी। लेगेसी का मतलब कंट्रीब्यूशन। इस फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन से हमें क्या मिला? तो बच्चों जितना आपने पढ़ा है उससे तो आपको समझ में आ गया होगा कि फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन क्यों इंपॉर्टेंट है। जो मैंने बार बार कहा कि ये मॉडर्न डेमोक्रेसी की जननी है, यहीं से मॉडर्न डेमोक्रेसी जन्म लेती है। आपने देखा बहुत सारे अधिकारों की चर्चा है। जो डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ मैन एंड सिटीजंस है, इसने ही गारंटी किया राइट टू इक्वलिटी की, और इसने गारंटी की फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच की। तो ये मूल है। बहुत सारे ऐसे अधिकार जिनका हम आज भी उपयोग करते हैं, जो कानून के द्वारा हमें दिए गए हैं, उसकी जो मूल है, उसका जो आधार है वो कहाँ है? तो वो डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ मैन एंड सिटीजंस। और इसने केवल फ्रांस को प्रोवाइड नहीं किया, इट हैज रेवोल्यूशनाइज्ड होल यूरोप, स्पेशली द कॉलोनियल्स, जहां के लोगों को एक प्रकार से गुलाम बनाकर रखा गया। दे आल्सो इंस्पायर्ड, इवन इंडिया वाज इंस्पायर्ड। आपको जान के हैरानी होगी कि उस समय में हिंदुस्तान के दो महत्वपूर्ण व्यक्ति इससे बड़े ही इंस्पायर्ड थे। उन्होंने फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन की आइडियाज को स्प्रेड किया हिंदुस्तान में, जो हमारी फ्रीडम मूवमेंट को इंस्पायर करती रही। आपने सुना है टीपू सुल्तान का नाम, द ग्रेट वॉरियर ऑफ मैसूर, सन ऑफ हैदर अली। टीपू सुल्तान खुद जैकोबिन क्लब का मेंबर था। फ्रांस में है वो, लेकिन वो उसका मेंबर है इंडिया में। वो उसके आइडिया से प्रभावित था। वो वहां से एक ट्री लाया था उस चर्च से, उसने लगाया था, और उसके प्रति वो सदा आभारी था। वो जैकोबिन प्रिंसिपल को फॉलो करता था। दूसरा राममोहन रॉय, द फादर ऑफ मॉडर्न इंडिया कहा जाता है, सोशल रिफॉर्मर्स, ग्रेट पर्सनालिटी। ही वाज आल्सो इंस्पायर्ड बाय द आइडिया ऑफ फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन। तो लेगेसी में हमें यही पढ़नी है कि उसका कंट्रीब्यूशन क्या है। तो उसने कॉलोनीज को रेवोल्यूशनाइज किया, फ्रांस के लोगों के जीवन को रेवोल्यूशनाइज किया, मॉडर्न डेमोक्रेसी की नीज को दी, यूनिफॉर्म कोड दिया, यूनिफॉर्म मींस ऑफ मेजरमेंट दी, उसने ट्रेड गिल्ड्स को खत्म किया। तो बहुत सारी चीजें उसके साथ, राइट ऑफ फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन साइड, डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ मैन एंड सिटीजन साइड। तो ये सब चीजें अब हम पढ़ेंगे अगले टॉपिक में कि हाउ फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन चेंज द होल यूरोप और लेगेसी ऑफ द फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन। बच्चों, now our journey of this particular chapter is going to be ending. This is the last one, and that is the essence of the chapter. The chapter was begun when I have asked the question why we have to read about or learn about the French Revolution, event that had happened more than 200 years ago. Why? Now we are going to get the answer. Why French Revolution becomes so important that we are still reading to know about the revolution. See, legacy means contribution, देन। लेगेसी का मतलब होता है जिसने मानव इतिहास की दशा और दिशा को बदल दिया। तो वो क्या घटनाएं थी? फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन से किस चीज की प्राप्ति हुई? तो बच्चों, जितना भी डिस्कशन हम लोगों ने किया है, तो अब आपको इसकी आइडिया, इस बात की पूरी की पूरी जानकारी हो चुकी है कि किन किन कारणों से फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन महत्वपूर्ण बना। यहाँ पे मैं उसी को निचोड़ रूप में लिख रहा हूँ, समराइज कर रहा हूँ, समअप कर रहा हूँ। आपको केवल वही याद रखना है और कभी भी ये घबराना नहीं है कि फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन क्या है। बस यू हैव टू जस्ट रिमेंबर व्हाटएवर चेंजेस had happened in French society after the revolution, that all were the part of the legacy. But one thing, only those changes that changed the lives of the people, that took the human society at upper or next stage in the level of development, only those things you have to remember, and that it, you will have the full authority to get full marks. So that is the way. Nothing is there to मतलब रटने की जरूरत नहीं है। तो क्या क्या है देखिए, the ideas of liberty, equality and fraternity, it was the essence of that revolution। वो यहाँ से निकलती है और यही मॉडर्न डेमोक्रेसी क्या है, बेसिक प्रिंसिपल है। इसने पूरी यूरोपियन कंट्रीज को प्रभावित किया और वहां से निकल के एशिया तक में आई, सारी कॉलोनीज में गई, वहां के लोगों को आजादी के लिए, अपने अधिकारों के लिए लड़ने की प्रेरणा दी। ये प्रेरणा स्रोत बन गए, लोगों को एक अंधेरे में एक उम्मीद की किरण दिखने लगी कि वो भी परिवर्तन के लिए आगे बढ़ेंगे। तो एक चीज हुई बात, टू फाइट फॉर देयर राइट्स अगेंस्ट देयर डेस्पोटिक रूलर, यानी कि जो ऑटोक्रेटिक रूलर थे उनके खिलाफ लड़ने की प्रेरणा दी। शोड द सीड ऑफ नेशनलिज्म, यानी राष्ट्रवाद की भावना, अपने देश के प्रति लगाव की भावना, यही है राष्ट्रवाद। अपने अधिकारों के प्रति जागरूकता, यही है राष्ट्रवाद। इसकी जनक फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन को माना जाता है। द डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ मैन एंड द नेशनल मैन एंड द डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ मैन एंड द सिटीजन्स, ये जो थी वो नेशनल असेंबली के फ्रांस के द्वारा जो ग्रांटेड थी 1789, इसने इन्फ्लुएंस किया मच द कॉमन पीपल इन देयर कंट्री। ये प्रत्येक देश के अंदर सारी कॉलोनीज को उनके लिए प्रेरणा स्रोत थी, कैसे शासन के द्वारा एक सर्व सम्मान तरीके से लोगों को अधिकार दिए गए, सूचीबद्ध तरीके से रिटन फॉर्म में कि ये अधिकार उनको मिलेंगे, सो दैट देयर शैल नॉट बी एनी कंफ्यूजन। ये इंपॉर्टेंट चीज। नेक्स्ट देखिए, इस अगर डॉक्यूमेंट्स को पढ़ें, इसी डॉक्यूमेंट्स के आधार पर मॉडर्न डेमोक्रेसी के कई सारे राइट्स को उपयोग किया। तो वास्तव में बहुत सारे ऐसे राइट्स हैं, राइट ऑफ फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच, राइट टू इक्वलिटी, ये सारी चीजें यहीं से आई है। तो सवाल ये पूछा जाता है कि इनलिस्ट डेमोक्रेटिक राइट्स दैट वी हैव टेकन फ्रॉम द फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन। तो इस प्रकार की चीजों को आपको ध्यान रखना। डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ मैन सिटीजन अगर पढ़ेंगे तो आप आसानी से आज में जो हम अधिकारों का उपयोग कर रहे हैं उसको हम मैच कर सकते हैं, उसकी चर्चा हम कर सकते हैं। नेक्स्ट वन, हेल्प टू स्प्रेड सोशलिस्ट आइडियाज। अब देखिए सोशलिस्ट आइडियाज की बात करेंगे, सोशलिज्म बाद में कार्ल मार्क्स के द्वारा इस संसार में आ रही है, दुनिया उसको कार्ल मार्क्स द्वारा जान रही है, लेकिन अगर जड़ को देखें तो यहाँ सोशलिस्ट आइडिया क्या, तो कैसे बात हुई कि फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन के समय में क्या बात हुई, तो बात हुई प्रिंसिपल ऑफ सोशल इकोनॉमिक एंड पॉलिटिकल इक्वलिटी। वास्तव में सोशलिज्म की यही तो एसेंस है, इक्वलिटी, एवरी स्फीयर ऑफ लाइफ में इक्वलिटी आनी चाहिए। उसकी शुरुआत इसी फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन में। तो बच्चों इस लेगेसी को याद रखेंगे। ये लेगेसी का जो प्रश्न है वो 5 नंबर में आता है, 5 मार्क्स के क्वेश्चंस में ये पूछे जाते हैं। और ऑब्जेक्टिव पेपर में मैंने चर्चा की, जैसे कि नेम द इंडियंस हु वर इंस्पायर्ड बाय द फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशन, तो आप नाम लेंगे राम मोहन राय और टीपू सुल्तान का। तो ये चैप्टर का आज ये लास्ट टॉपिक था, ये चैप्टर खत्म हो रहा है। अब बच्चों आपके लिए काम ये है कि आप सारे लेक्चर्स को अच्छे से देखें, आप अपने पास एनसीईआरटी बुक रखें, उनके साथ इन लेक्चर्स की बातों को मिलाएं। कहीं कठिनाई हो तो आप हमें जरूर बताएं। आपको पता है कि किन साधनों से आप हम तक पहुंच सकते हैं, आप कमेंट भी देख सकते हैं और वहां भी आपको सवाल के जवाब दिए जाएंगे। इसमें कहीं कोई कठिनाई नहीं होगी। नेक्स्ट डे हम लोग न्यू चैप्टर के साथ मिलेंगे और मैं उम्मीद करता हूँ कि वो नया चैप्टर हम लोग शुरू करने वाले हैं। इस चीज में तो हम शुरू करेंगे